Hey, welcome back to ScreenCrush, I'm Arey. So Mandalorian Chapter 23 is titled Spies, but nobody is actually ousted as a spy. But we know that somebody's got to be working with Moff Gideon.
Well, how do you know that?
Well, it's pretty obvious. I mean, Moff knew exactly where and when to intercept the Mandalorians, and brought more than enough firepower to match their combined forces. Plus, this is one of the first episode titles that didn't have obvious context.
So who do you think is the spy?
Well, I think there are a number of possibilities. It could be Axe Woves, or there's the surviving Mandalorians that we met in the last episode.
We have failed you, but our blasters remain in your service.
And remember, these refugees took them straight to the forge where the trap was waiting.
Those of you who are well enough can join us in the search for the Great Forge.
We can bring you there.
I mean, after all, guys, you don't cast Skinny Pete just to be an extra.
We knew you would not forsake us, Lady Bo-Katan.
Yo, man, I'm Skinny Pete.
But every one of my comments have had the same compelling evidence that the spy is actually the armorer.
What? The leader of an extremist cult may have an ulterior motive? Who could have seen that coming?
All right, well, when you put it that way, it seems kind of obvious, but there are some layers here that go all the way back to the Clone Wars and even Darth Maul. In fact, we've theorized for a couple years that she may have been one of the Mandalorians who fought alongside of Darth Maul. See, we recently released a video on why the Darksaber is cursed, which provides a lot of context for this video, so definitely go check that out for some more info on this topic. Essentially, Maul is able to make himself the leader of a group of Mandalorians named Death Watch after defeating Pre Vizsla in combat.
I claim this sword and my rightful place as leader of Death Watch.
Maul takes the Darksaber and the Mandalorian throne after overthrowing the pacifist regime on the planet. The Mandalorians under Maul's leadership all wore horns on their helmets as a tribute to their new leader.
Wait, the armorer has horns on her helmet too.
Ding ding ding, as does Moff Gideon, but more on that later. Palpatine eventually stopped Maul's conquest, but that didn't necessarily end his leadership. While the Darksaber has to be won in combat, there is still a very specific set of criteria that has to be met in order to transfer leadership of Mandalore. The most important being that the Darksaber has to actually be present during the fight, but there's also a level of reverence and recognition that has to be given to the Darksaber. Otherwise, anyone who lost a fight with the Darksaber would have to give it up.
Have mercy. Please, please.
Now, Palpatine has no respect for the Darksaber, so it doesn't matter to him that he defeated Maul in combat. He just wanted Maul to be dead so he could tie up loose ends and maintain the rule of two.
The first and only reality of the Sith. There can only be two.
Wait, what's the rule of two?
Okay, so the rule of two is a Sith code that states that there can only be two Sith working at a time. One to hold power and one to pine for power. This rule was established by a Sith named Darth Bane. You see, there used to be like thousands of Sith, just like the Jedi, but their desire for power led them to destroy one another.
The Sith killed each other, victims of their own greed.
Hence, now, there can only be two. This is why we had Sith Inquisitors, but they were not full-fledged Sith Lords. Now, by the time the Clone Wars rolled around, Palpatine had already begun seducing Dooku to the dark side.
How many have died because of my actions?
Such is the price of freedom.
And Dooku was a far more useful apprentice because Palpatine was about to start a galactic civil war. So Maul was kind of already outliving his usefulness by the time he was killed.
You have been replaced.
But somehow, Maul returned.
Yes, he survived his duel with Obi-Wan and got robot legs. And then his conquest of Mandalore ended when Palpatine defeated him. But even after Maul was defeated by Palpatine, he still had a number of loyal supporters, and these loyalists broke him out of prison. And of course, Maul retook Mandalore again, but his forces were finally defeated by Bo-Katan and Ahsoka Tano. We also know from the post-credit scene in Solo, and from a number of Star Wars comics, that Maul became leader of a criminal syndicate known as the Crimson Dawn, and that he had created a base of operations on his homeworld of Dathomir.
Bring the ship and come to me on Dathomir.
Which is also where Sabine Wren eventually finds the Darksaber in the show Star Wars Rebels. Now, we know the names of two of Maul's most loyal supporters, Rook Kast and Gar Saxon. So, after Maul's defeat, Gar Saxon joined with the Empire to become the ruling governor of Mandalore. But some of Maul's Mandalorian followers must have stayed loyal to him.
It is not the way of your people to hide here in the gutters. If you die, I promise you, it will be on the field of battle.
We think that some of these elite warriors played some kind of role in the formation of Crimson Dawn, and this brings us to the armorer.
This is the way.
This is the way.
There's plenty of mystery surrounding her and her origins. We don't even know who she is or how she became head of Den's Covert. Nearly every child of the Watch is a foundling, a child who was plucked from their homeworlds and then converted to Mandalorianism.
You just made up that word, didn't you?
Sure did, but it sounds legit, right?
You could have just said the way.
You're right. So anyways, out of all the Children of the Watch, the Armorer is clearly the most Mandalorian in every way.
It was forged over 1,000 years ago by the Mandalore Tar Vizsla.
She knows about the Great Forge.
The air rang with the music of 100 hammers.
Death Watch.
It shattered into many warring factions.
And even the Mythosaur.
The Mythosaur belongs to all Mandalorians.
She has first-hand knowledge of Bo-Katan.
Bo-Katan is a cautionary tale.
Which is why more than a few people have speculated that she's one of the original members of Death Watch Rook Cast.
I know of such things.
Her red armor seems to certainly match that of the Armorer, and she's been completely MIA after Maul's fall from power.
Songs of eons past tell of battles between Mandalore the Great and an order of sorcerers called Jedi.
Now, since Maul didn't technically lose the Darksaber to Palpatine, or to Ahsoka, or to Obi-Wan, it's entirely possible that she and other members of Death Watch saw Maul as their true leader until his death.
Wait, slow down. So what's Death Watch?
Okay, so during the Clone Wars, Death Watch were the original hardcore Mandalorians. While the Mandalorians who actually lived on the planet tried to become pacifists, Death Watch wanted everyone to remain warriors.
We have learned from this beast the consequences of pacifist principles. It's now time to restore the traditions of Mandalore.
Death Watch rescued Din when he was just a foundling. Even Bo-Katan used to be a member of this group. And in this last episode, the Armorer reminds us what happened to Death Watch.
Death Watch exists no longer. It shattered into many warring factions.
She's basically admitting that she was a member of Death Watch. So some remnants of Death Watch would see Maul as the only legitimate wielder of the Darksaber. Now, of course, we know that Maul dies on Tatooine with Obi-Wan Kenobi, which would be a major complication for these ultra-Orthodox Mandos. If Maul is dead, no one can best him in combat, and thus, no one can acquire the Darksaber by tradition. And also, let's say that some members of Death Watch became part of Maul's organization Crimson Dawn. They would have no reason to stick around following his death. See, Death Watch and the Children of the Watch are clearly connected. Hence, Paz Vizsla, who is a relative to Pre Vizsla, the former leader of Death Watch. And the Armorer clearly has knowledge on how Death Watch dissolved. I think she could have played a major role in how this organization ended. You see, the Children of the Watch are essentially fundamentalists. They have returned to their roots and stay true to the old ways.
This is the way.
Hence, they are forced to keep their helmets on and settle their disputes in trial by combat. The fight between Paz and Din showed that they also recognize the significance of the Darksaber.
It was forged by my ancestor, founder of House Vizsla, and now I will win it from you.
But, unlike other Mandalorians, they don't think that it entitles you to leadership. So what if Rook Cast, aka the Armorer, converted the remaining Death Watch members into the Children of the Watch after Maul's death? This would follow a similar pattern to the fundamentalist movement, the Quakers, or the Protestant Reformation, or even the Apostles after the death of Jesus. By returning the Children of the Watch to their old ways, not only does the Armorer provide a solution for the Maul Darksaber loophole, but it also gives her the priest-like authority we've seen since the beginning of The Mandalorian.
But didn't Gideon's mask also have horns on it?
I'm glad you mentioned that. Now, I've got a feeling that Gideon was once a Mandalorian too.
Wait, what?
Yes, and there's a lot of evidence to back this up. Gideon embodies the conqueror mentality that many members of Death Watch carried. He even says,
Mandalore will live on in me.
He understands the complex nature of the Darksaber's rules and why the saber is so significant. He has intricate knowledge of Mandalorian traditions, rivalries, and culture. He's literally created his own semi-Mandalorian army. Additionally, unlike his Dark Troopers, Gideon's armor also has the Iron Heart.
Wait, his armor has Riri Resms?
No, Doug, the Iron Heart, or Karta Beskar, is a sacred part of the Mandalorian armor. It's a small diamond in the middle of the chest that distinguishes them as legitimate Mandalorians. It was necessary in the Clone Wars so that people could tell the difference between true Mandalorians and those other thousands of clones that were copied from an original one. This could also mean that the horns on Gideon's helmet aren't simply for intimidation, and it's entirely possible that both Gideon and the Armorer are from the same initial version of Death Watch.
But if they were old buddies, why did Moff join the Empire?
Well, lots of Mandalorians joined the Empire. Clan Saxon, Finn Rao, and even Sabine Wren for a while. Maybe Gideon saw the Empire as a way to return the Mandalorians to their glorious warrior roots. So if Gideon and the Armorer had these drastically different views on how to reform Death Watch, this could very well be the reason why they split.
But I thought you said you thought the Armorer was a spy who was working for Gideon.
Absolutely, my guy. She's the one that convinces Bo to unite the tribes of Mandalore, and she came up with a pretty convenient excuse to get the hell out of Dodge before the Moff's ambush.
These here are too weak to continue. We must return to the gauntlet and I will ferry them back to the fleet in the morning.
She was also conveniently left alive when most of her culvert was slaughtered in Season 1. Plus, the armor is the only one we've seen who's been able to forge Beskar armor, which seems to be a distinctive and unique skill. It's possible that Gideon could have also gotten some assistance on how to make his armor from his former colleague, the Armor.
Okay, but why?
Well, that's the question, isn't it? Well, maybe after years of doing things her way, she realized that Moff Gideon was right. Heck, she's been forced to relocate multiple times because her forces were outnumbered, and it's possible that she sees this as a critical weakness in her cult's armor.
I see what you did there.
Thank you. Since Moff is essentially creating a new army of Mandalorians, she could see this as a hard reset for the Mandalorian legacy.
This is the way.
One that could potentially restore them to their rightful place as some of the most feared warriors in the galaxy. It would also make sense that this is why she wanted Bo-Katan to unite the people behind her. As soon as Bo-Katan said that she had seen a mythosaur, the Armorer realized that Bo-Katan was a potential threat to Moff Gideon's plans. So she arranged for all of them to get together in one place so Moff Gideon could wipe them out once and for all. Now with that said, there are still a few holes here and a lot of speculation, so hopefully we get some clarification in the finale. But what do you think? Do you think the Armorer could be Maul's successor? Let me know your thoughts on this theory down in the comments below or at me on Twitter. And if it's your first time here, please subscribe and smash the bell for alerts. For ScreenCrush, I'm Ryan Arey.